everybody, I'm Kate Cass. Welcome to our edition of Let's Talk About. Today, it's time to talk about Stitch Day, officially. One of the most beloved traditions here on the channel is celebrating the many adventures of Experiment 626 on his special day. But this time, we may have reached the end. Endings can be difficult, especially with something you spend so long with. But it can also feel like reaching a satisfying destination after a long journey. And that is represented quite well with the topic of this video, Leroy and Stitch. When I decided I was going to be covering the movies, I knew getting to Leroy and Stitch would be a big deal. A movie that acts as the finale to the Lilo and Stitch TV series, Lilo and Stitch's long-running adventures together, and as the final major piece of Stitch media I have to talk about. So how will such a big series conclude? Let's take a look. For successfully capturing and reforming all 625 experiments, Lilo, Stitch, Jumba, and Pleakley are rewarded for their efforts with big new opportunities now that their mission together is done. When they go their separate ways, Hamsterville pulls a final gambit in his mission to rule the galaxy, aided by a new, very evil and powerful experiment named Leroy.
What? It is a genius name!
The only thing that can stop them is the universe's biggest Ohana banding together to protect what they've built one last time. Well, yeah, this is about where I'd expect this to go. I think from the moment you hear the premise for Lilo and Stitch the series of Lilo and Stitch on a mission to rehabilitate the other 625 experiments, the natural assumption would be that the series would end when they did just that. And it is pretty cool to return to the council room of the Galactic Federation where Jumba and Stitch's trial was held, now to see them with their family and celebrated as heroes. Now obviously not all 625 experiments were shown on screen. The show only ran for the traditional 65 episodes an animated show needed for syndication back then, but this movie still acts as a showcase to how many different characters they created to fit this premise. I go more into the variety of the experiments in my review of the show, but we get to see a lot of them again here, happily living their new lives, and even some never before seen cousins who probably didn't warrant full episodes of their own get some cameos. If you're curious, between Stitch the movie, the TV show, and Leroy and Stitch, there are 110 individual experiments shown on screen. That's a pretty decent amount. It makes us all feel almost like a victory lap to how much the characters and the crew behind the scenes accomplished. There are tons of other fun callbacks to the series as a whole as well. This is the kind of stuff you go to a series finale for, and it's really fun as a longtime fan pointing at the screen at everything you mildly recognize and are surprised the crew took the time to remember. The universe just feels so much more full and bright after everything that's happened, and Leroy and Stitch takes quite a bit of time to celebrate that. The biggest fan service moment for me, though, is that we finally learned Lilo's last name.
Finally, Lilo Perikai.
That only took 4 years. But this final adventure isn't all about celebrating. Another classic trope of a series finale is the beloved group going their separate ways to explore new possibilities, ready to face new ventures with the development they had throughout the show. Leroy and Stitch waste no time letting us know that they intend to tackle exactly that. As reward for their accomplishments, Jumba is allowed to return to his scientific work, Pleakley goes from a laughingstock of an agent to a respected expert on Earth studies, and Stitch goes from a fugitive to captain of the Galactic Federation. The rewards also show how far the aliens' reputations have come after all this time, which is fulfilling to watch, but then you realize that in order for everyone to reach these new horizons, they have to leave the planet they've been calling home. The threat of the beloved group parting ways is an incredibly common one in series finales, and how well it works really varies. It might seem odd at first that the aliens are so eager to take these opportunities and hesitate to stay with Lilo, but when you really think about it, it kind of makes sense. Because none of them decided to stay here, they were all exiled with nowhere else to go. You could argue Stitch would have stayed no matter what, but the fact of the matter is that they were outcasts, and Earth is the place that accepted them, so they stayed. Now, given the chance to achieve great things back among the stars, yeah, I could see them entertaining the idea, but they love and care enough about Lilo to try and repress that. Very unsuccessfully, but it's the thought that counts. Lilo doesn't want to go back to feeling alone like she did before she adopted Stitch and the others fell in her lap. We even see her sulking in the same hammock from the night before she was almost taken away by social services in the first movie. But just like when Stitch first tried to leave, Lilo loves them enough to know when it's best for them to move on. Leroy and Stitch pulls off this incredibly common trope really well by displaying the growth and sadness of what everyone leaving means. The actual farewells turn out to be very emotional and heartfelt. They may be excited for what's next, but still love fondly what they're leaving behind. Earth, Nani, and Lilo. I do think it's very cute that Lilo phrases her goodbye speech in a way where it sounds like they're going to the one true place they belong, just like all the cousins they helped. She even gives them all gifts to remind them of their home on Earth, which they all treasure. I really like Stitch's. A tiki necklace so he can carry a piece of his first home and his best friend with him wherever he goes.
Promise to never take it off?
Promise.
What is this salty discharge?
But even with exciting opportunities awaiting them all, there are still complications. Lilo looks after the other experiments, but they all have lives of their own to tend to, meaning she's still lonely. Stitch may still be a little menace, even as a respected hero, which is very funny, but at the end of the day, he's also all alone. For the first time, really, when you think about it. Pleeka doesn't get to engage with the students and share his passion of Earth, and as much as Jumbo loves having his original workplace back, which looks almost exactly like it did in Stitch as a Glitch, I appreciate that, not having anyone around to share that work with starts to give him a feeling of disillusion. It becomes an interesting realization. None of the aliens expected Earth to become such a warm and loving home for them. Going back to where they believe they truly belong only signifies how much they've grown and changed. They don't suit life in space anymore, fit into these roles and aspirations as much as they might have just a couple of years ago. It takes less than a day for them all to feel homesick, but because they're so far apart, they can't express that to each other. Although Pleakley gets so lonely mere hours into this that he calls his common law partner just to feel something.
But don't you miss your Aunt Pleakley?
No!
I'm wearing the wig.
Happy Pride. Lilo does try to call Stitch after a day or two on her own, but has no way to contact him. Okay, I'm sorry, small rant here. Why did the aliens not give Lilo any kind of way to stay in touch? They have the technology, they could have rigged something up for her to call them. That just seems mean, or at the very least short-sighted. But don't worry, I'm sure they learned their lesson here and miscommunication like this won't ever be a problem again. This all turns out to be the least of their problems. As mentioned in the beginning, Hamsterville escapes from prison for, I think, the 4th time? Boy, you guys are bad at your job. It's a wonder you managed to keep Habit Rail over here in custody all this time. With his newfound freedom, because Hamsterville seems incapable of developing something that could conquer the universe on his own, he barges into Jumba's lab to make him do it. The confrontation between Hamsterville and Jumba is rich with nuggets of lore. I always love moments where we're reminded of their past partnership, and here we not only get an idea of what that time together was like in a way we never have before, but also how it fell apart, including that Hamsterville was the one who turned Jumba into the Galactic Federation, presumably to steal the rest of Jumba's work behind his back. And when Jumba was released, he just did that anyway.
You did nothing but cheat Jumba, embarrass Jumba, steal from Jumba, and finally think on Jumba to Galactic Federation.
For such a devious little gerbil, Hamsterville is pretty creatively bankrupt. In order, he sends Gantu to do his dirty work by breaking him out, attempts to manipulate and steal from Jumba, and once he's got a nasty little experiment of his own, he proceeds to clone it en masse, like he was planning to do with Stitch back in Stitch the movie. This even comes across in perhaps my favorite joke of the movie. Like, this movie is already pretty funny with some really quotable lines. I personally think Lilo and Stitch as a whole is funnier than people give it credit for, but Hamsterville trying to come up with a name for his experiment that Lilo didn't already use is priceless to me.
Kicks.
Used it.
Slugger.
Done.
Cannonball.
He jumps in the water, makes awesome waves.
What did you expect? She had to name over 600 of these things. All the good names were taken. Of course he wound up with a silly name like Leroy. So, what are we dealing with Leroy? Well, think Stitch back when he was still a fugitive. Basically, he's just evil Stitch, right down to being red instead of blue. I'm gonna be honest, I'm usually not too wild about experiments that look a lot like Stitch. As a kid, I didn't mind, but the more they've tapped that well of new, mysterious experiments as the franchise has gone on that just look like Stitch with extra bits on it, I found it to be kind of uninspired when Jumba's line of experiments have such an amazing range of standout designs. However, Leroy was created to just be Stitch, modeled for Hamsterville. He has some of Stitch's more menacing original body language, but is a bit more gnarly and mangy in the design to make him come off as a more evil entity. He has a lot more powers too, making him a more formidable foe, a believable force to be reckoned with that could be a threat to Stitch and all of their allies. So for those reasons and more, I think he gets away with it. In fact, maybe they keep making experiments like Stitch because it works so well here. Hard to say. That and the amazing battle he has with Stitch. Stitch has fought a lot of experiments this time, but this is the coolest one-on-one battle in the series. Even if he loses. Sorry, buddy. But on the subject of Leroy, I'm just gonna touch on this thing that comes up sometimes because I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't. Where exactly is Leroy in the experiment catalog? Now, this might sound silly at first to ask. Stitch is 626. There was an episode of the show about Jumba making 627, so that would make Leroy 628. Right?
Good guess, but actually no.
Many fans have pointed out that Jumba was in the process of creating 628 at the end of 627's episode. So was this the early stages of creating Leroy, or is Leroy an entirely different experiment? I've seen people argue over this for years. There was no official clarification for a long time, so it was really just left up to interpretation. Leroy pops up every once in a while in small supplementary material and merchandise. He's one of the more popular cousins to be marketed, especially in Shock of All Shocks, Japan, but almost none of this ever featured his experiment number. I dug around to see if there's ever been any official designation, and it turns out the answer is yes. Leroy appears briefly in the Stitch and the Samurai manga, which, if you don't know what the hell I'm talking about, would take too long to explain, we don't have time to go into it, but what matters is that in it, he is dubbed Experiment 629 in an official piece of media, even a dubiously canon one. Only downside is that it was a Japan-only chapter of the manga. Thankfully, this was backed up in 2021 in the Ultimate Disney Stitch sticker book. Yes, really. So that's official enough for me. Which is a shame because I was on the 628 train for a long time. The lesson here is that important pieces of lore can come from anywhere. And hey, if Jumba can't even remember every experiment he's made, maybe we can cut ourselves some slack.
Why not just call it 627?
You already made 627.
I did?
Thank you for indulging me and putting that contested matter to rest. Now back to the universe-conquering rodent. We have seen a lot more of Hamsterville's approach to his evil ways since his debut in Stitch the movie. Hamsterville's strategy is usually to recruit or manipulate characters more powerful than him to do his bidding and follow his orders to conquer in his name. Of course, this hasn't worked up to this point, but here we see the result of what would have happened if it did, if he was able to use one of the experiments for his purposes. But at the same time, on the other side of the galaxy, Lilo's tried and true methods are working against him undetected. When she goes to see 625, who Gantu left behind, looking for a way to call Stitch. And I really adore this scene because as a kid, it really made me realize my own shortcomings and assumptions. I never put it together until it was pointed out to me that on this mission to rescue and reform all of Jumba's experiments, Lilo and Stitch never tried that with 625. When you're watching the show, you just kind of assume, why would they? He's one of the bad guys. But looking back, 625 has never really had any evil intentions. He just kind of fell into Gantu's lap and kept crashing with him. As long as he got somewhere to loaf around and make sandwiches, he was fine with whatever. The only remotely evil thing I remember him doing is tricking Angel, and even that was for sandwich-related reasons. But as we are reminded, Lilo is better than all of us. Not only does she do something nice for 625 before asking him for a favor, despite working for their nemesis all this time, but as soon as she realizes she didn't give him a name, she fixes her error right away and comes up with a great one.
I know! Reuben!
Huh. Reuben. Oh, I like that.
It's a surprisingly smooth transition calling a regular character a new name, and I can finally call Reuben by his true name. Oh man, I was trying to maintain continuity all this time, but it always felt so weird saying 625 again. Reuben's new name is also the first step in his unexpected reformation. Like I said, Reuben wasn't like his cousins, where he was evil or mischievous and needed to be turned good. He worked with the bad guys, but more out of convenience, not because he had aspirations to cause chaos or destruction, because Reuben's had no aspirations. He never strived to do anything besides make sandwiches, so no one ever expected anything from him. Now suddenly Lilo comes along and not only humanizes him and shows him compassion, but when they find out about Leroy, shows him what courage looks like. Reuben has lacked courage and motivation all this time. In spite of having all of Stitch's abilities within him, he never tapped into those abilities. It's only when someone needs him and believes in his potential and decides to stand up despite being at a big disadvantage does he unlock the powers he's always had.
Are you with me?
I'm with you, sister.
This was a jaw-dropping moment for me at the time. It's one of those things you really want to see, even though you know there's a good chance you never will. It's a very satisfying transformation for Reuben that feels really genuine, even if it is kind of quick. Together, they race off into the stars to protect the Galactic Federation as best they can, which Lilo doesn't tell Nani about. Yeah, Nani is pretty absent in this movie. She is supportive towards Lilo during the big choices in the first third, but after that, the alien stuff takes over, and Nani is left to be unaware of it all. I do wish she had a bit of a bigger role to bring the whole found family back together for this final outing, but oh well. I did like the detail that Lilo and Reuben were cleared to land because technically Gantu's ship is Galactic Federation issued. It's nice that they remember that. What they find is that Hamsterville has managed to conquer the entire Galactic Federation with his army of Leroys in a matter of hours.
Leroy?
What's wrong with Leroy?
Nothing. I like it.
See?
That is wild. Turns out Hamsterville is kind of terrifying when he gets enough power. He crushes Lilo's spirits when it seems like most of her ohana is gone and everything they built together on Earth is about to be destroyed. It's not the saddest realization in the series by any stretch, but the best part is the way she's lifted back up, not just by Reuben, but by Gantu, of all people. Let's talk a bit about Gantu's role in this movie. Having failed all 624 attempts to capture experiments for Hamsterville, he considers this his last attempt to prove himself. If he can help his boss here, he'll be set for life. I think one of Gantu's defining characteristics is dedication and obedience. If he's put on a job, he will work as hard as he can to fulfill it. The only reason he hasn't succeeded so far is because usually his opposition is Stitch. When he failed with the Federation, he thought he could succeed with Hamsterville, but even that proved to be faulty, and despite being labeled as the main villain of Lilo and Stitch, he wasn't immune to change. Like the other aliens, Gantu has spent a lot of time on Earth, and even subtly, he's grown a bit of a fondness for the love and loyalty that can be found there, even if he's never made much of a part of it. Problem is, the only people he has anything resembling a personal connection to are Reuben and Hamsterville. A scene I think really illustrates this is when Gantu offers Hamsterville a lei, a gift of thoughtful significance on Earth, that Hamsterville proceeds to ignore the significance of and eat.
It symbolizes.
Excellent. I'm starving.
Wait, you're not supposed to.
If that doesn't represent their different values, I don't know what does. Gantu is fiercely loyal and dedicated to a mission, but even after all this time, he's not gleefully evil like his boss is. The fact that Gantu never succeeded where Leroy could kind of proves that. Despite how much he's tried to harm the good guys, he's not a bad guy deep down. His problem all this time has been placing his loyalty behind the wrong cause, because the second Hamsterville gets a better option for someone to carry out his evil bidding, he tosses Gantu aside. A vicious, metaphorical slap to the face. Although I'm sure it would have been a literal slap if the hairball could reach his face. Now directionless, he's left to confront the fact that everything he's done all these years didn't amount to anything. How everyone, even Reuben now, seems to have changed for the better, except for him. Perhaps even feeling some guilt after seeing how the actions he played a part in affects Lilo. So, no longer valued by Hamsterville, he tries something else, fighting for those who might appreciate it in a way that might feel more fulfilling.
I'm breaking you two out of here. Aloha.
Aloha!
Gantu's reformation in the moment could also be seen as happening pretty quickly, but I feel like it's something that's been slowly building over time. He's had moments of cooperation with our beloved Ohana, especially Lilo, and this is just a matter of tackling a new opportunity. Like I keep saying, Lilo's influence is strong. Despite being far away from Stitch, Jumba, and Pleakley, she manages to impact them and help them out. All of Lilo's parting gifts wind up playing an essential role in the story, saving their lives and leading to reuniting them all. With everyone ready to save their extended family, they race back to do just that. Why they took the van spaceship instead of Gantu's, I don't know, but it does give us this great joke.
Where is Gantu?
He's still in back at the back.
Thanks.
Before we move on to the big climax, I do want to highlight another potential reformation. Myrtles. No, I'm not kidding. Now, if you didn't watch the TV show, Lilo and Myrtle's relationship actually gets a bit more complex in it. For the most part, Myrtle serves as the stereotypical bully acting as a foil to Lilo, but there were a few instances of Lilo and Myrtle reaching a compromise, or Lilo learning to be the bigger person and do something considerate towards her. Heck, the last episode of Lilo and Stitch the series that aired was about them learning to work together. With that context and the larger idea of Lilo and Stitch that there aren't really villains in it, it makes sense how this last hurrah would try to include some bits humanizing Myrtle a bit more. Like implying that the reason we've never seen her father is because he abandoned her and her mom.
And I also bet that he's never coming back. Just like Myrtle's dad. Quiet, Yuki!
Look, I appreciate the attempt to add more tragedy to Myrtle, but it does feel very last minute and tacked on, especially because it doesn't really add anything or build on this or past stories, unlike with Reuben and Gantu. Except for maybe that hula she performed in Stitch as a Glitch being an attempt to please a dad who wants nothing to do with her, but that's a stretch and more likely a continuity error. What I think they should have focused on is Myrtle's connection to Gigi. One of the biggest acts of compassion from Lilo towards Myrtle is letting her keep one of the experiments after she found a home with Myrtle. So when Leroy is sent to capture all the other experiments, he captures Gigi and Myrtle along with her. Despite being involved with alien antics multiple times at this point, Myrtle achieves Seto Kaiba levels of denial about the paranormal things around her, until she discovers something.
Nice one, cousin! You can talk?
Her perfect little pup that she's always using to talk down Lilo and her weird dog Stitch is also a weird alien. This is something that I really think could have led to a bigger revelation and a meaningful connection with Lilo after the way she's acted towards her, but it's so quick that aside from a small moment towards the end, nothing really comes of it. Like I said, I appreciate the attempts with Myrtle here, but I do think they did a much better job performing Reuben and Gantu, and thus Myrtle still remains one of my most despised characters in fiction. Not sorry, kid. The climax comes about after Leroy manages to capture all the other experiments in less than a day, including the ones that are no longer on Kauai or even Earth, which shouldn't be possible. I'm gonna let that go for now, but just to show how I've always had the mind of an internet reviewer, that used to drive me insane when I was 13. This is the big set piece of the film, a large arena where our heroes will fight for the lives of all 625 experiments.
Actually, 624, because you subtract Stitch and whatever!
These crowd shots had me in awe when I was younger, and even now, I'm very impressed with the work that went into all these shots with different angles and even a decent amount of animation and movement. To make the crowd shots seem bigger, there is some copy and pasting and recoloring going on here, and yeah, if you want to get really picky, some of the scaling is way off, and some experiments change forms from sequence to sequence. Both forms of Plute and Foon, for example, can be seen at different points, but even with that in mind, gathering all 110 experiments into multiple shots like this was very ambitious, took quite a bit of dedication, and in the end looks really cool. It's just such an exciting visual. Pause at any moment and you can search the crowd to find some of your favorite experiments, like Timon and Pumbaa?
Wow! If you're hungry for a hunk of fat and juicy meat, eat my buddy Pumbaa here because he... Let's just cut to the chase, shall we?
Oh, sure.
The scary part is that this is the moment where Hamsterville got exactly what he wanted. All the experiments are captured and in his clutches, but now he has Leroy, an army of Leroys. He doesn't need these guys to conquer the universe anymore, and as we've seen, once Hamsterville doesn't need something anymore, it is disposable. While under normal circumstances, this wouldn't be a contest between one experiment and all the rest, this guy was able to apprehend all of them and take on Stitch on his own, and now there's thousands more of them of equal strength. It makes this spectacle of a finale feel like a real threat, coupled with perhaps the most hardcore line Hamsterville has ever had.
Aloha! As in, goodbye.
Think of it like the 100 Lions question. If hundreds of cousins are faced with thousands of clones of the most dangerous illegal genetic experiment, how do they survive? Well, according to this movie, you get Stitch to rally them together, make an unintelligible motivation speech, and charge in to save your little alien lives. The battle between the Leroys and Stitch's cousins is glorious. It's so chaotic with some great matchups in the battles, showing off the exciting and humorous ways each experiment's abilities can help take them on. I can only imagine how many ideas for this wound up on the cutting room floor, but I'm so glad they fit in as many different fights as they possibly could. But as much as they put up a good fight, the cousins eventually get overwhelmed by Leroy and his clones, and they need another way to hold them off, or it's all over. Which they eventually find through the power of music. This is gonna make sense, I promise. Remember how I said that all of Lilo's gifts to the aliens play an essential part in the story? In this case, Lilo gave Jumba an Elvis record, which, unbeknownst to Hamsterville, he used to implement a kill switch in Leroy. If he hears the song Aloha Oi, he'll shut down. This is a really fun climax, paired with the return of Stitch's Elvis costume, which I don't think we've seen since the original movie, But I want to talk about the song choice. As a kid, I thought it was fine because it's a song brought up a few times throughout Lilo and Stitch's story. It's a fun way to bring everyone together to find a solution in a big way, and I really like that Reuben was part of the main song. But as time went on, I started to question the song choice, because Aloha Oi is meant to be a more melancholy song, a way to comfort through hard times, and learning that the song was written by the last monarch of Hawaii, Queen Liliuokalani, as a symbol of mourning her country after its forced annexation into the United States, I started to feel like a jazzy rendition of a kids' movie might not have been the best idea. However, I found out while fact-checking that Aloha Oi is associated with the overthrow of the monarchy of Hawaii, but it wasn't originally composed for that. Rather, it's inspired by a romantic encounter and then departure Liliuokalani experienced. Essentially, it was written as a fond farewell to someone you adore. I want to stress that the song being appropriated as a song of farewell to the monarchy of Hawaii is not a bad thing. Saying that's why it was written is incorrect, but it's not invalid to associate it with that. In fact, the original use of Aloha Oi in the first Lilo and Stitch movie evokes the very same feeling of a forced farewell among Hawaiian people. But the more I looked into it, I started to feel like the original inspiration for Aloha Oi can be applied to the way it's used in Leroy and Stitch. The whole story is about fond farewells that are believed to be destined, with the ever-present hope to be reunited one day. At the climax of the movie, the song signifies them all coming back together after an emotional farewell, bigger and better than ever, loving each other and celebrating that. Now, it's possible I'm looking too deep into this or misreading things about a culture that is not my own. Maybe this is as offensive as I feared, maybe it's perfectly fine and upbeat. To be perfectly honest, I wasn't quite sure who to ask about this. But as I was educating myself about Aloha Oi, I couldn't help but see this interpretation, and found it kind of nice and unique that Lilo and Stitch has moments to represent both of the most important stories surrounding one of Hawaii's most culturally significant songs. In a way, it symbolizes what I've talked about a few times already, how life on Earth has shaped the alien life that now inhabits it. The greatest evil in this corner of the galaxy is defeated not by fellow aliens or a show of overpowering force, but by a celebration of the culture and homeland they've all become a part of. Everything Lilo and her ohana went through in this movie makes them all see how happy they were with this unexpected situation they wound up in. They all became a family almost out of necessity. It's a situation they grew comfy with, but there still wasn't an option for them aside from this life. But given a way out, they all realize how much they love their new lives on Earth with Lilo. It's the final way they use the trope of found family going their separate ways really well. Because growing not only meant becoming capable of taking on new roles in life, but realizing that sometimes opportunity can't replace love, family, and friendship. They've all grown so much that, for now at least, they are perfectly happy right where they are. That's all they need. So they all willingly and happily go home. Except for Gantu, who, despite barely contributing to the defeat of his former boss in the final fight, is offered his old captain position back when there's an opening available thanks to Stitch, which he accepts with just a bit of enthusiasm.
Would you be interested in resuming your position as captain of the Galactic Armada?
Would I?
His friendship with Reuben is also affirmed when he asks him to stay by his side in this new venture. I thought that was really sweet. I wish we had gotten a little peek at what their new lives looked like. The last scene of the film might just be one of my favorite final shots to a series. Just think about how it shows how far we've come. We went from two lonely sisters struggling, reminded with a photograph of what they lost, to this picture that shows how much larger this unique little ohana has gotten after the many adventures since Stitch crashed into their lives. It's so special and meaningful, and I don't think we could have gone out on a better note. Oh wait, yes we can. We can find out the one true place Hamsterville and his little abominations belong. Prison. I'm sure he won't be back. Overall, Leroy and Stitch might just be one of my all-time favorite series finales. From the moment this adventure to capture and reform all 625 experiments began, you could probably guess that this is what the conclusion would be. But it wraps things up so nicely and feels so fulfilling and complete in a way that most finales strive for, but few achieve. It goes through the motions smoothly by using a lot of typical tropes you'd see in a series finale, but uses them to take a well-deserved victory lap for everything they've achieved with the world and characters in the last 3 movies and 60 65 episodes of television, reminding its fans of why they followed this adventure for this long, and celebrating what's been built in all that time by showing that nothing can knock them down if they stick together and keep inviting those willing to join their ohana in. It's a heartfelt reminiscence and an all-out spectacle. One moment soft and reflective, the next adventurous and bombastic. The animation in particular is really ambitious for a direct-to-video cartoon finale. Sure, if you look closely, you can see through the cheaper cracks pretty easily, but the fact that they even came close to matching the high expectations they set is already commendable. As a big fan of Lilo and Stitch as a whole, it's incredibly easy to get swept up in the spirit and fun of it all. There are so many little things I could geek out about with the things I remembered and thought of, even more than I already have. I love how they remembered Snooty lives with Lilo's friend Victoria. I love how Yarp was in the horn section during the big song. I love that a show of Leroy's force was getting squeaked to stop talking. I love that Leroy does the mimicry thing with hamster veal like Lilo and Stitch did that one time. I love Angel kicking a bunch of Leroys in the head to help her boyfriend. And I especially love that Lilo made an experiment logbook, because I did too. It's by no means complete. Looks like I did about 85 of the experiments. I think the others were too hard for me to draw at the time, and I'm censoring out some details because it gets a little too self-inserty at points, as you can probably tell. But this is the kind of thing that shows how much this show captured my enthusiasm and imagination back when it was airing. I used to go through the crowd shots and montages in this movie frame by frame on my portable DVD player, looking for references for my artwork. There are actually a couple of original creations in here, like, you know, this is from a Disney Flash game that used to have, where you could basically make your own experiment from Frankensteining parts of other experiments, and this was one of the ones I made. There you go, guys. You finally have an experiment in the 400s. What is this one? Oh, so I think in the credit scroll for Lilo and Stitch, they tell you all the names of all the experiments, even though we never see all of them. And one of them was named Spot, so I invented an experiment that would suit that name. I'm not gonna lie, I think I did pretty good for 13, adhering to the design philosophy of the experiments. And this is from the one episode, the Kim Possible crossover, where they mistook Rufus for an experiment. This is what I imagined the actual experiment would look like. They never confirmed it, so it's canon until it's not. Leroy and Stitch was this massive curtain call to something that shaped a lot of my life at the time, and to an extent still does. It's one of those movies I can probably recite line for line, and each time I revisit it, I'm firm in my belief that this is one of the best series finales I've ever watched. I couldn't have asked for a more satisfying conclusion to say aloha to Lilo and Stitch. And now it closes out another big chapter in my life. With that, we're done. We've covered every major piece of Stitch media for Stitch Day. It feels kind of fitting that we'd go out on the 10th anniversary of Let's Talk About. Sure, there's some manga and books and maybe even video games we can talk about in the future, but in terms of the important stuff, I think we've tackled everything 626 has done.
Huh?
Hi? You're a little late, buddy. We're just wrapping up. Say, why do you look slightly off color? Like you've been redesigned or... Oh no. Fine. One more time. Thanks for watching, everyone. Definitely let me know what you thought of Leroy and Stitch in the comments below. That's why the series is called Let's Talk About. And for now, let's keep it to Leroy and Stitch. I know everyone has feelings about the remake, but that is next year's problem. I want to give a very special thanks to my patrons who help support my content, including Jinx Productions and Wait in the Wings. If you'd like to join these fine people in supporting my content while getting cool exclusive perks, you can check out my Patreon page at the link in the description, as well as my other social media if you'd like to check out any of those. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you guys next time.